following program is a sponsored program. The opinions or statements made by the host and guests do not necessarily reflect the views of AM 600 and FM 100.3, The Answer, or its parent company, the Chesapeake Portsmouth Broadcasting Corporation.
Have you ever been face to face with a police officer and wondered, is he about to kick my ass? Well, wonder no more. If you follow these easy tips, you'll be fine. First, obey the law. Laws were made for a reason. Think of them as hints. You've heard people say, man, I wouldn't do that shit if I was you. Well, here's some of that shit. Carjacking, armed robbery, arson, selling drugs, buying drugs, stabbing, shooting. You know, you probably won't get your ass kicked if you just use common sense. If you jump a subway turnstile, you might just get off with a warning from the police. But if you jump a turnstile carrying a loaded gun and smoking a joint, then maybe you need your ass kicked. We all know what happened to Rodney King. But Rodney wouldn't have gotten his ass kicked if he had just followed this simple tip. When you see flashing police lights in your mirror, stop immediately. Everybody knows, if the police have to come and get you, they're bringing an ass kicking with them. Here's a no-brainer. If you're listening to loud rap music, turn that shit off. Blasting fuck the police while you're getting pulled over by the police is just ignorant. When an officer approaches your car, be polite.
Is there a problem, officer?
And stay in your car with your hands on the wheel.
What the f*** you want, my
Unless you want your ass kicked. Want to give a friend a ride? Not so fast. Your friend might be crazy. Now, before you let your friend in your car, ask them these questions. Do you have a gun? Do you have drugs? Do you have any warrants? And in case you do get pulled over by the cops,
license and registration, please.
Remind your friend to do this one thing. Shut the f*** up.
Don't give him s***. What the f*** you want?
If you have to give a friend a ride, get a white friend. A white friend can be the difference between a ticket and a bullet in the ass. Here's a tip you should never forget. If your woman is mad at you, leave her at home. Because a mad woman will say anything.
He got weed! He got weed!
If your woman is mad at you, there's nothing she'd like to see more than you getting your ass kicked.
That's right! Kick his ass! He got weed! He got weed!
Now let's review. Obey the law. Use common sense. Stop immediately. Turn that off. Be polite. Shut the up. Get a white friend. And last but not least, don't ride with a mad woman. If you follow these simple pointers, you probably won't get your ass kicked by the police.
Man, that's one of my favorite clips from the Chris Rock show. That clip is over 7 years old. But he really nails it, doesn't he? You know, I was reading about poverty and joblessness, and this Marie Harf over at the State Department, she's the assistant propagandist, talks about lack of opportunity and joblessness being the source of the hopelessness that inevitably leads to terrorism. So in this clip that I want to play for you, she essentially tells Chris Matthews we need to help countries build their economies. And, you know, launch our own war on poverty globally. I want you to listen to this clip. Jack, play clip 2.
We can work with countries around the world to help improve their governance. We can help them build their economy so they can have job opportunities for these people. You're right. There is no easy solution in the long term to preventing and combating violent extremism. But if we can help countries work at the root causes of this, what makes these 17-year-old kids pick up an AK-47 instead of try to start a business? Maybe we can try to chip away at this problem while at the same time going after the threat, taking on ISIL in Iraq, in Syria, and helping our partners around the world. I mean, we've seen these horrific pictures.
Turn these more. You know, the problem is we can't even do this in Baltimore, much less the Middle East. So this genius, Marie Harf, she believes we need to essentially launch a global war on poverty, and that will somehow defeat ISIS, by offering those who would just as soon pick up an AK-47 a job. Well, thanks, Marie. I really needed that economic lesson. And the truth, Marie, is this country is suffering from this 50-year war on poverty. A war that has consumed 3 times more resources than all the wars the U.S. has fought since the Revolutionary War combined. This is from a piece in the Heritage Foundation's website, The War on Poverty After 50 Years by Robert Rector and Rachel Sheffield. In his January 1964 State of the Union address, President Lyndon Johnson proclaimed, "The administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. In the 50 years since that time, U.S. taxpayers have spent $22 trillion on anti-poverty programs. $22 trillion with a T. Adjusted for inflation, it's 3 times the cost of all U.S. military wars since the American Revolution. Yet progress against poverty, as measured by the U.S. Census Bureau, has been minimal. And in terms of President Johnson's main goal of reducing the causes, rather than the mere consequences of poverty, the war on poverty has failed completely. In fact, a significant portion of the population is now less capable of self-sufficiency than it was when the war on poverty began. We've lost the most costly war in our history, and our government has failed us. Freddie Gray and what happened in Baltimore since his death is evidence of the failure of big government and progressivism. And the failure of big government, perpetual democratic administration of a city, is turmoil, chaos, citizens suspicious of the police, acting out against the police, and rioting and looting. And you know, I don't understand why race is so prominent in our politics today. You know, I don't understand why black Americans feel this powerlessness. I mean, how can they? The president's black. The attorney general, the U.S. attorney general is black. His replacement, for God's sakes, is black. The secretary of Homeland Security is black. The mayor of Baltimore is black. The prosecutor, the attorney for the city of Baltimore, the prosecutor is black. The entire leadership chain, everyone involved is black. And yet, they're powerless to stop the rioting and chaos following the death of a suspect in police custody. That's Freddie Gray. Look, I think there's one word that really sums up the foundation of the problem. Regardless of what the race baiters say, there's really one word: accountability. Accountability. And sadly, there's no accountability, not from the black president, not from the black attorney general or his black female replacement, not from the black mayor, not from the black Baltimore police commissioner, Anthony Batts. It doesn't make any sense not to hold someone accountable in Freddie Gray's death. And I understand that they've indicted the 6 officers, half of them black, half of them white. They've got 5 of them in custody. But there should be accountability for all the officers that were injured in the riots. Those responsible should be held accountable. Those responsible for the looting, the burning, and the destruction, they should all be held accountable. But just like the war on poverty, I don't think there's going to be any accountability or justice for that matter. And the one thing we should unite around, Americans should unite around, is this concept of equality as it relates to justice. Equal justice under the law. Equal justice under the law. And I doubt a progressive chain of leadership from the president to the Baltimore police commissioner will seek equal justice. And the reason is race. They know race and the perception of injustice, whether it exists or not. I'm not saying there's not bad actors. There's bad actors everywhere, in every industry, in every government agency. But it doesn't mean we need more government. The perception of injustice, it serves a purpose. It serves an agenda. And how is it that we allow those charged to serve us to subsidize failure while punishing success? How is it we don't hold these people accountable? I mean, the result of anti-poverty programs have hurt the very people they were designed to help. I mean, look at affirmative action, a subsidy for underachievement, an equalization of the work effort. This is your equality, Mrs. Clinton. But instead of setting a standard for all, we allow race, sanctioned by government, to be the subsidizing factor, the antithesis of Jim Crow laws. Affirmative action serves no one. If anything, it reinforces inferiority and encourages substandard performance. It traps those it aims to elevate at the bottom. You know, I can't stand to discuss race because up to this point, I really felt like we had moved towards a colorblind society. I mean, race, gender, national origin, all these things, they should be irrelevant. But not holding those accountable because of race, you know, that frustrates everyone. Whites and blacks, Latinos, it frustrates Americans. But you know, race has entered everything. And forgive me for discussing it. But, you know, it's time we look upon each other as Americans. It's time we reject the racial division sown by so many in the political arena. Those who claim to serve us. I mean, we're the uniters, the peacemakers, the calming forces. You've got a complete chain of black leadership, and they're failing the very people that they should be serving. All Americans. You know, if anything, they foment and exacerbate the problems in our black communities. And being black is no longer an excuse for being powerless. Being black is no longer an excuse for being powerless. Progressivism is more damaging to black Americans than anything a racist could possibly do short of violence. Look, the Democrat George Wallace would be proud of the segregation today. And it did not occur because of some policy or edict from a bureaucratic despot. It occurs naturally. Segregation occurs naturally. Just like the miracle of American energy independence, albeit that's stalled for right now, but the map of the census shows that people naturally live together across racial and cultural lines. In other words, not to be cliche, but birds of a feather flock together. No government required. You know, it's like marriage. For thousands of years, all of recorded human history, marriage was naturally between a man and a woman. It occurred that way first, before the foundations of the institution were forged, before all of the traditions, the music, and all of the other things, the trappings of marriage. It was first and foremost born out of the relationship between a man and a woman. But you put that idea into the hands of misguided progressives, and it becomes a civil right. I got to take a break, but when I come back, I want to continue this discussion of what's happening in Baltimore, this rioting, and apparently it's happening in communities across the nation. And I want you to think about the leadership and what they're doing to quell it, if anything, and the endangerment of the thin blue line. You're listening to Forrest Wilson, The Resistance. We'll be right back.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
Hey, if you want to weigh in on the talk today, 904-222-TALK, 904-222-8255. Have you noticed that Democrat leaders fear using the power of the military and police to rescue people from impending danger? I mean, think about it. Look no further than Benghazi in the leadership of the President Hillary Clinton. 4 dead Americans, no one came to their aid, no one was called. They were literally left to fight it out with the personnel they had on the ground. A dead ambassador. Someone ordered the military to stand down. And the mayor of Baltimore, in a Benghazi-ish maneuver, admitted that she and her administration told police to give the looters space to destroy. A denial of help to the citizens and property owners of Baltimore. I mean, I get it. Progressives don't, number one, they don't understand property rights. I know they don't respect them. But this is no different than the stand-down order when help was so desperately needed in Benghazi. And liberals and progressives are really useless in times of crisis. Baltimore and Benghazi have more in common than just a few letters. They've got flawed leadership. I want to bring in Dr. Gerard Lameiro. He's an author, philosopher, economist, and engineer. He's the author of Renewing America and Its Heritage of Freedom, America's Economic War, and Choosing the Good Life. Dr. Lameiro, welcome back to The Resistance. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be back with you.
You write in your blog, with all the rioting and violence this week in Baltimore, we need to ask, what were the real causes of the Baltimore riots? What do you make of it, and what are the real causes?
Well, there's no question that the progressive philosophy, the ideology of progressive socialism, Marxism, redistribution of wealth, that whole ball of wax is responsible for hurting the city of Baltimore. I mean, progressives have run the city of Baltimore for the last 40 years. 40 years. So if there's a problem, you know who to point the finger at. It's the progressives. They're responsible for a whole lot of failed social policies that include very high unemployment, very high crime rate, and failed schools. So it's a climate of failure. And of course, we know that progressives selectively uphold the law. If it favors some group or some person they support, well, they kind of wink at breaking the law. The rule of law needs to be upheld for every American. Every man and woman in America should follow the law and should be guaranteed their constitutional rights of liberty. Progressives don't seem to like to do that.
Well, history has shown that these movements, these progressive movements, usually end badly for the leadership, these socialist movements. But I guess they figure that somehow it's going to be better here in the United States and they're going to pull it off. But the use of race is really amazing to me. Amazing when you've got the entire chain of leadership from the president all the way to the mayor, all the way to the chief prosecutor there in Baltimore. They're all black. 3 of the arresting officers were black. How can they use race to advance that agenda so successsuwsuly?
Isn't that funny that this would even be considered a racial issue when some of those cops who are, who have been arrested or whatever, with the possibility of hurting this fellow, are black themselves. And the mayor is black and all those people. That's not the issue at all, but they try to get away with it because that's one of the wedge issues that progressives have been trying to create division among people in the United States. Wherever you look, Ferguson, anytime there's something that happens to a black person, they try to blame it on racism. But let's face it, whoever commits a crime should be arrested by the police. I heard one news report that said that he was in the middle of a drug deal when he's arrested. I believe that person was arrested 22 times before. So, I mean...
That's Freddie Gray,
ridiculous.
Was arrested 22 times before.
Yeah. And by the way, let me go back and talk just a bit more about the progressives and how they ran the city of Baltimore, because they've run it into the ground. I mentioned high unemployment. Do you know it's 3% higher in the city of Baltimore than the whole state of Maryland? And the crime rate in Baltimore, in terms of overall crimes among cities in the United States, is ranked number 5th. in the nation for high crime. And then the schools. Let me give you an example out of this week's Wall Street Journal, one of their issues. I think it was Wednesday's issue. The Wall Street Journal said that 72%, that's almost three-quarters, of eighth graders in Baltimore schools scored below proficient. That means they were not proficient in mathematics. 64% were below proficient in science. 45% were below proficient in reading. The progressives have failed to educate the youth in Baltimore. That's one of the reasons they can't get jobs. That's one of the reasons they're frustrated. That's one of the reasons it's harder for them to get into college and make a life for themselves. Progressivism is equivalent to failure. Socialism always fails anywhere it's tried in the U.S. And when it's tried around the world, you have those great socialist utopias like North Korea where everybody's starving to death. And you have that great utopia in Cuba that the president wants to recognize where everybody's in poverty driving cars that are 60 years old. Isn't that a wonderful place and socialism a tremendous success?
And where the people resist, like in China, you have 40 to 60 million dead.
Right.
You're listening to The Resistance, and I'm talking to Dr. Gerard Lameiro, author, philosopher, economist, and engineer. His blog is gerardlameiro.com. It's LAMEIRO.com. gerardlameiro.com. I want you to go check him out. Dr. Lameiro, can you hold through the break? I want to continue our conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, you're listening to The Resistance. We'll be right back with Dr. Lameiro, AM 600, FM 100.3. The Answer, you're listening to The Resistance.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
I'm talking to Dr. Gerard Lameiro, author of Renewing America and Its Heritage of Freedom, America's Economic War, and Choosing the Good Life. Dr. Lameiro, you know, in the break there, they were talking about these police officers being indicted on various charges. You know, how about the looters, the rock throwers, the arsonists, the riot inciters? How about the mayor for not protecting innocent citizens of Baltimore and property owners? I mean, when are these people going to be held accountable?
You're absolutely right. You know, I think one of the first duties of every public citizen, and I assume the mayor of Baltimore is no exception, have to swear to an oath of office that they're going to uphold the laws. And I think the mayor, when they asked, when the mayor apparently ordered the police to stand down for that first night and let them destroy, 144 vehicles, fires, rock throwing. Did I hear 100 officers were injured?
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely terrible. And their job is to uphold the law, and progressives seem to think it's okay to wink at the rule of law, wink at the Constitution, and not protect people's private property. I guess it's because progressives don't believe in private property. I think in general, you know, progressives are an offshoot of Marxism. And in Marxism, they believe that the government owns all the property. So I guess they think it doesn't matter if you destroy a little property. That CVS pharmacy, it's okay if you burn it down. I guess that's what they must think. And you know, the irony is, who is being hurt by this? That poor community there, that area that was rioted at, that CVS pharmacy, the city of Baltimore had lobbied to get that. And that was the only place, my understanding, that you can get a prescription filled in that neighborhood. Now, what new pharmacy is going to want to move in when CVS was burned down? It just hurts that community.
Yeah, these are questions that aren't being asked.
Go ahead.
These are questions that aren't being asked in any media outlet.
That's right.
They're just simply not being asked. They're talking about the officers.
Isn't that ridiculous? I don't know if one of those officers accidentally, pushed him too hard and helped to break his back, although there were reports initially that another van rider, another person that was arrested, heard him banging and thought he was trying to hurt himself. I don't know what the facts are. That's for the courts to decide. But I don't think it was malicious first-degree murder or anything near that, where somebody was out to kill the person. Even though he was a long-time criminal, I don't think they would do that. I think the police are just trying to arrest him. Let me give you one other statistic that just baffles the mind about Baltimore. Another reason to say the progressives have failed. The city of Baltimore has about 645,000 residents, okay? So it's a fairly decent-sized city. And believe it or not, there's an estimated 60,000 drug addicts. Around 10% of the population of Baltimore are drug addicts, including 48,000 of which are on heroin. Can you imagine that? This is a city where the murder rate is 37.4 murders per 100,000 population. These are terrible numbers. You know, President Obama said that the citizens should search their souls. And you know what? It's one of the few times I agree with him. They ought to search their souls and start voting for somebody who's pro-American, pro-Constitution, pro-rule of law, and who believes in freedom and upholding our rights and freedoms, including private property rights.
You know, I really think you're dead on, and I think a lot of black Americans would vote that way if somebody would tell them the truth, but they're being lied to by the Democrats. And so many of the Democrats that are lying to them are black.
Yeah.
I want to play something and get your reaction to it. Jack, play clip 3 for me, the Sharpton call. Play
We need the Justice Department to step in and take over policing in this country. In the 20th century, they had to fight states' rights and to get the right to vote. We're going to have to fight states' rights in terms of closing down police cases. Police must be held accountable. I don't think all police are bad. I don't even think most are bad. But those that are need to be held accountable.
Somebody ought to hold him accountable for what his actions have been, by the way.
Yeah, they ought to hold him accountable for his taxes, for starters, but he is inciting violence against police, and he's done it in city after city after city, and the guy continues on. Do you know he has visited the White House more than Andy Stern of the SEIU? Wow. Nobody is holding this guy accountable, including the president. Anyways,
well, let me tell you what I think about it. I think you see what's behind a lot of these riots. We were getting at the cause in this article I wrote. I was getting at the causes of the Baltimore riots. And this is something the progressives want. They want to nationalize the police forces of the United States. That's a local function, part of, states' rights. Every state does their own police function. But the progressive socialists and socialists in this country want to take over the police forces, and this is one of the ways they're agitating. I think since Obama's been in office, I think there's about 17 to 20 police forces that have basically been neutered locally, like Ferguson recently, and basically are following guidelines issued by the federal government. So they're in the process of nationalizing the police forces. You keep hitting these police forces. You don't let them respond and keep law and order. And you're essentially taking over the police function. The other thing that's behind a lot of this is they're not happy that all their cities are bankrupting themselves, like Detroit and Baltimore are not doing well. And what they're hoping to do is squeeze more money out of the private sector for social programs that, by the way, never work.
Yeah, I was talking about the war on poverty and all of the things that haven't worked over the past 50 years. We spent close to $22 trillion on this war on poverty with little to no success. I mean, none that you can point to. Can you point to one thing that has worked? I mean, affirmative action is a disaster. All these other social welfare programs are a disaster. They trap the very people they're designed to uplift.
That's right. And the example recently that I always like to use is this Solyndra. Here's some small little solar startup company, and the federal government gives them almost $600 million, and in 2011 it goes bankrupt. Now, I think the CEO walked away with a lot of money, and he apparently was paid, but the business itself went out of business because, unfortunately, there's no big market for solar. It's just too expensive compared to other cheap fuels that we have in the United States. And I was thinking to myself, if I were a venture capitalist and I had seen Cylindra and I thought it had a chance, which, by the way, I don't think it did, but if I thought it'd have a chance, I'd give them maybe $20 million, and I'd say, go out there, spend it wisely, come back and show me some results. And if you have good results, I'll give you another $20 million. They don't give somebody $600 million. That's like throwing the money away.
As a huge moral hazard.
Progressives is they throw our money away.
Exactly. And that $500 million, $500 million, was taxpayer money. And
right.
It may have been money that never existed to begin with because they did what? They borrowed it. So they hung it on our future. Yeah,
and by the way, I'm going to point out something. This is in the way of breaking news happening this week in the press and that, not seen widely in the press, but in a few places. We can spend a few $1 billion on hardening our infrastructure against a nuclear weapon detonated over the U.S. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, detonates it over the middle of the country up in the air, it could virtually knock out this country's infrastructure with an electromagnetic pulse. And experts who know a whole lot more about this area than I have written in the Wall Street Journal, and it's appeared in a few other conservative publications, that for a few $1 billion we could protect our country from an EMP attack. And when you deal with people like in Iran or North Korea, they might consider attacking us. We have to protect ourselves. That's where our money should be spent, defense.
Yeah, no doubt. And the president talks about preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, but it seems that the negotiations are going in such a way that they will be able to break out in a very short period of time at any point and get a nuclear weapon. And we already know that they have intercontinental ballistic missile technology provided by the North Koreans.
Absolutely. Today's Drudge Report, I'm sure you read that. There's a story in the right column about Joe Biden, the vice president, talking about the path to nuclear, and I'm not quoting him word for word, I don't have it memorized, but the path to nuclear weapons for Iran has been set.
Yes.
This is in the Drudge Report. You can click on it right now.
I saw that article.
Yeah.
So we've got a situation where I would guess about 20% of our population would consider themselves a liberal. Is that correct?
I put it at 15%. That would be what I would call progressive socialist.
How on God's green earth do we wind up with all of these policies and all of these people when the vast majority of Americans are not progressive, they are not liberal? I mean, how do they have such influence? They basically control media, education, the government. How is that?
They have gone for the power positions. They have spread themselves out. They're in academia. It started in the universities and colleges. They followed Marxism. They loved Marxism. They taught Marxism. They taught a generation of teachers to like Marxism. And, a lot of kids go through college, and they're not going in there with ideas of, how to run the country. They're going in there just trying to get educated and get a job, and they get indoctrinated, and they're not prepared, especially those who've gone through K through 12, where the teachers are liberals and progressives. And so I think that's part of it. But still, most Americans are conservative. They love freedom. They believe in the Constitution. They think we're headed in the wrong direction. And the answer, though, is that these people have gotten into certain positions. Don't forget, they love government. They love power. So you'd expect they run for office and try to get that power and get into those offices. And, of course, the news media, those folks work directly with the government people, and they're more or less of the same mindset. So that's where it's happening. But the real thing is we have to keep arguing for our side, and we need leaders. And anytime we get a conservative running, they usually win. Did you know that Obamacare passed with no Republican votes, and every senator who voted for Obamacare in 2010 is no longer in the Senate? They've all been gotten rid of, they retired, or they were voted out because Americans don't feel happy about Obamacare. They're against it. They were against it by 67% back in 2010. They're still against it.
And, the Senate still acts like it's under Democrat control, though.
We need tough leaders. We need leaders who aren't wet noodles. We need people with backbone who are going to stand up, and we're gradually electing more and more conservative people. And let me tell you, as bad as America is in terms of our situation today, I am optimistic because I know most Americans love freedom and want to support the Constitution and our freedom. And we've had 2 landslides. One landslide, we took over the House. The second landslide, we took over the Senate. And next year, if we run a conservative candidate for president, we're going to have the 3rd landslide, and we will take over the White House, and we're going to restore America in 2017.
I always love having conversations with you because they always end on such a high positive note. And I want to thank you, Dr. Lameiro, for coming on today. If you want to check out his books, Renewing America and It's a Heritage of Freedom, America's Economic War, and Choosing the Good Life, check out Dr. Gerard Lameiro, gerardlameiro.com. And you can see his blog. Dr. Lameiro, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, and thank you for all you're doing with your radio show. It's great.
I appreciate that. We will be right back. You're listening to The Resistance, AM 600, FM 100.3. The Resistance.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
And if you want to check out our website, it's wethepeople1787.org, wethepeople1787.org. I want to take a caller. This is Bob on line 2. Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today, Forrest?
Oh, fantastic. What can I do for you, brother?
Well, I just wanted to call in and let your listeners know that the St. Johns County Republican Party is having Governor Rick Perry from Texas at a free event on May the 14th, starting at 5:30 in the Flagler College gymnasium. Great air conditioner in there, and don't have to worry about getting rained on. That event is coming up, and as a part of it, we're going to have a blue jeans, boots, and barbecue after the free public forum where the governor is going to speak and answer some questions. So as part of our program this year to bring in at least a half a dozen presidential candidates, this is the first one in a series. So if you want to come and get educated, Governor Perry has quite a record in Texas, and for those veterans out there, he is the only one out of 22 announced candidates that has served in the military. He served from 1972 to 77 in the U.S. Air Force, flying C-130 tactical aircraft. And I think everybody believes that with the last 6 years we had with Obama, military experience in a president who's the commander-in-chief is absolutely essential.
Yeah, absolutely. Is Governor Perry, has he announced?
No, he has not announced. This is an open forum for people of all parties and persuasions to come and make their own decision as to whether or not this could be somebody they would like to support.
Okay, and that's May 14th. It's at 5:30 p.m. Governor Rick Perry will be at a free event at the Flagler College Gymnasium. Did I get that correct, Bob?
That's correct, and if you'd like more information, you can go to the St. John's Republican Party website, www.sjgop.org.
Excellent. Well, Bob, I really appreciate the call. Appreciate you giving us a heads up. Maybe we can get Governor Perry on the show here in the future.
We'd love to do that. And thank you for having me on.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Let me get to another call. Line 1. George, how are you, sir?
Yeah, good afternoon. In the 50s and 60s, my father was a follower of Barry Goldwater and other conservatives. And back then, we taught kids that the Soviet Union had a long-term plan to conquer us with fascist socialism and crony capitalism. And we have not been teaching that ever since agents of the Soviet Union and their friends in the Muslim world have taken over our universities. And I want to give you a list of countries, and then I'm going to tell you something about those countries. North Korea, Russia, Venezuela, Argentina, and England now that it's gone communist. What else do they have in common? Other than the fact their economies are going to pot with the socialism they've instituted. They all have hemorrhagic brain diseases, which are not detectable with normal medicine. And you could walk up and talk to some.
That's like Ebola is a hemorrhagic fever. Is that correct?
Right. You have Russian Spring. You have mad cow in England. You have Venezuelan equine encephalitis. You have an Argentine equine encephalitis, and Argentina went communist. And if you look around, you'll find that these people don't have a lick of common sense. At least half the population can't think. And if you talk to some of these rioters there, and I've seen the interviews of them, they don't seem to know why they're out rioting. They just got a tweet that said, let's go on out there today, now, and they don't have a lick of common sense. If you want to destroy a country, you destroy people's ability to memorize stuff and to think logically.
Destroy it from within, and that's what's happening.
All the things I told you are modified versions of the original. They're bioweapons, and they have been turned loose. And it's not just that they've taken over the universities and media, whatever. They are actually using warfare methods on us.
Well, George, I want to thank you for the call. I don't doubt it. I don't put anything past the progressive liberal agenda. I don't trust them. I don't trust a lot of government. I think the government's way too big. It needs to be brought back to a limited position so that Americans can prosper and we can have self-government once again. I don't even know if people know what that means at this point. But self-government, self-rule is something that this country used to have, and for the last 100 years or so, we have been steadily in decline as it relates to our government. And, to the point, well, I guess we'll have to save that till next week. You've listened to The Resistance, AM 600, FM 100.3. My name is Forrest Wilson. I'll hope to see you next week, 2 to 3. Thanks for listening.